Welcome to the Why Music podcast, where we talk to independent artists about their journeys, the inspirations behind their music, and ultimately why they make music. This next artist is a Nashville-based singer-songwriter that believes in the power of connection. Taking emotions and experiences and combining them with acoustic pop elements, he creates a new journey with every song he writes. Coming off of a recent release of his EP, Imperfectionist, he is constantly telling new stories. Welcome, Christian.
Hello. Good to be here.
Good to have you. I always like to start things off with where your journey with music kind of all kicked off.
Oh God. You really want to start at the beginning? I mean, literally in the womb. My mom was like singing in a band, like while she was pregnant with me and my brother and my sister. Um, and so we've been surrounded by music um, from a very young age, and we all started singing when we were really young. Um, and we're going way back. I got my first guitar when I was 10. Started writing songs within a couple of years after that. And I just stuck with it, and it I knew that's what I needed to do. That's what brings me purpose, and that's what fulfills me and feeds my soul. So yeah, I wrote my first like song when I was probably 13, and I released it when I was 14. It's not up anymore. Thank God I took it down. But I'm eventually gonna re-release it when I re-record it. But um, yeah, it was a cool experience to get into that so young, and I just kept at it. Um, I mean, I wrote like released my first full album when I was I don't know, probably 20. Um, and yeah, I think that was like, yeah, it was about 20. It was 2014, I think. I've just been recording, and I went to undergrad, my first undergrad for classical voice. And I was formally trained there and graduated from there, spent a few years, um, you know, doing like freelance shows and gigs and, wine bars, cafes, things like that. And then I, uh, I went to Berkeley I got accepted in 2019 for songwriting. And my time there was obviously a little cut short because of the pandemic. Um, but the time that I was there, it was a mixture of online and in person. And uh, it just opened my eyes to so much that I had no idea about in the world of music and songwriting, and careers in general. Um, and I think I've become a much stronger writer since then. And I dabbled in production ever since I was young. Like I said, I've been producing my own stuff for years. And then my training at Berkeley and Benedictine, um, just really solidified those skills and made me stronger in that area. And obviously it first came up like a kind of a necessity to produce my own stuff because I couldn't really afford to outsource that. But I just fell in love with it, and despite not having like the most you know competitive sounding tracks, I love being in. I love being part of that process and having it come to life under my fingertips. Um, and yeah, so then I moved to Nashville last year in 2022, and yeah, what's 2023 right now, right? Yeah. And been here for about a year, and still meeting people, trying to play some gigs, and I've been doing a lot of music. Um, I got a lot of music out on Spotify and everything else. So that's what I want to do, and that's why I'm here.
um, so obviously it's like you said, it's been a whole lifetime of music. Um, at what point was it that it, because obviously it was always music is what I need to do, but when did that kind of transition into being what I ultimately want to be doing is writing my own music and putting it out with my name on it? Like, when was it really I want to be doing the artist thing? When did that kind of develop?
Well, for me, I guess I didn't really know when I was younger um, that there was any other way. Like I just thought songwriters are making bands and releasing music, and that's that. Um, so it kind of just happened. I mean, I obviously became accustomed to performing, and when I was really young, I was also in a high school band, and we played around for 5 years or so. And I got comfortable with that, and then with my solo stuff. Like I said, it was just kind of second nature to me. Despite being kind of a shy, reserved person, when I'm on stage, like playing music, it's totally different. And uh, yeah, I guess my point is that it wasn't really a decision. It was just it just was. That's just how it was the whole time. As soon as I started writing songs, I was an artist. I put my stuff out right away, and that was me as an artist. I didn't think like I need somebody else to sing this for me. I wanted to do it myself. I don't know if that answered your question, but
No, I think it does. Um, and like you kind of touched back, like your first project really put out 2014, which, now is crazily enough 9 years ago. What has made you kind of continue to put new stuff out and continue to put that much time into not only writing and recording your own music, but doing all of the production and mixing and everything? Like you said, you do it top to bottom. So what's made you kind of stick with it after all these years? Because I think the majority would probably have thrown in the towel by now, just be not from the that's what you should be doing kind of thing. I'm a fan of your work, but like what is it that's really stuck it with you after all these years?
um, I mean, I guess it's kind of a tough question to answer. I mean, my first instinct is to say that um, I I just can't picture it another way. Um, like it's kind of a cliche, but artists create because they must.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no other way. And for me, writing has always been an outlet. Whether it's dealing with you know real life circumstances or converting emotions into stories, or just pulling things out of thin air and making something, even if it's not even directly related to me personally, but just having some sort of creative outlet. And I guess what's kept me going is just that there's so much in me that I have to get out. And you know, I've come out with so many releases, um, ever since my first one was, which I said I think was like 2007, which is when I first released it. Um, but I have just I think everybody, a lot of artists, just songwriters in general, have like just folders of hundreds, if not thousands, of files of song ideas and lyric ideas and melodies and whatever. So like honestly, like I don't see myself ever stopping despite whatever the circumstances are. Um, because that's as cheesy as it is, like that's my calling, that's my vocation. That's what I need to do to find peace and happiness and fulfillment. And so I guess that's what kept me going, is that I still have so much left in me to get out. And there's still more being. I can't, the way I can't describe it is like, there's a pitcher of water, and there's still water being dripped into the pitcher, and I'm not going to stop, until it's empty. And even, you know, even after that, I don't think I'd want it to stop. Um, but I guess my point is that, um, that's what's kept me going, is the just the need to do it.
Food, water, shelter, music.
Yes.
It's a life essential at this point.
But again,
Um,
another point I want to make though is like, you know, it's not just the music, because I first started playing music. I was just sort of learning the ropes and playing and singing, songs I already knew,
mhm.
from my favorite bands way back when. but then it got to a point where it's like I was having original ideas, and the concept of an original idea to some people is very foreign. Not everybody's a creative. Not everybody is an artist or a songwriter. It's about the creation as well. It's not just like playing music. I think that they're both fulfilling in their own ways. And some people don't like to write. Some people choose not to write. Some people, you know, and some people like me, they have to write. They have to create, um, because I feel like if I'm not if I'm not making anything original, like I'm not fulfilled. Um, because I mean, who am I if I don't have you know, my originality or my uniqueness? So I think that you know my music, my creativity, and my original music gives me a lot of my identity, I guess.
No, absolutely. And I think that kind of speaks not only to your kind of journey with music, but just who you are even as a writer. Is it's like when it's something that you just, to be completely frank, like just can't go without, like it's not something that you're just going to half ass. It's not something that you're just going to do to be able to check off the box. It's something that you're going to do with a purpose. It's something that you're going to do with the end goal in mind. It's something that you're going to do to translate what's up here to a song. It's that's what separates true kind of like writers and creatives and artists to people who are just kind of going through the motions or taking their stab at it. Is like, if it's something that you can live without doing, why are you doing it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, some people try and get into, um, I mean, there's nothing wrong with this. My point is that like some people they dabble or they dive into music, but then they give it up after a while, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, but my point is that I guess for people like that, it's just different, because they don't have the need to do that thing. Um, yeah,
Yeah, there's not the same fire under their ass, you
sure.
know. That's how I'll put it. Um, what do you think most often inspires your writing?
It's hard to say. I mean, so much of my music um, is I'm gonna quote one of my professors from Berkeley. His name was Ben Camp. I don't know if he said this or if he got it from someone else, but he said basically like an artist's release is them just shedding their skin. Um, and so what I take from that is that um, there's no I don't like to box myself in. So you know I think a lot of my writing in general, if we're, like at the root of it, is about like vulnerability and kind of being open and sharing your emotions. Even my very first song was, uh, obviously a love song, but the point is that, I'm not like trying to put on a mask or a persona as an artist. Some people do that and that's fine, but me as an artist is me. Um, but my point is that I also don't like to box myself in because I like to kind of rap these songs in different ways, like gift wrap, WARAP. My point is that because a lot of my music would be categorized differently. I mean, I have some like new age instrumental stuff. I have a now taken down EP of like electronic house instrumentals. And then I have my kind of my mainstay, which is like acoustic alternative pop rock. And then I also have some stuff that's like super poppy and kind of like mainstream almost. And I guess that if I had to kind of like describe or encapsulate my music and my inspiration, it mostly comes from a place um, of vulnerability and self acceptance, despite some of my songs and lyrics being quite self deprecating. But the way that they're packaged, um, can vary depending on you know depending on where I am in my life or what I'm feeling that day. You know, so I don't know if that really answers your question, but
No, but that does bring up, I think it does, but it brings up also another point. With, like you said, like some of your stuff has been very like acoustic pop ish, but you've also had your hand in electronic kind of vibes, which is just like putting the two next to each other. They're not exactly like on the same kind of wavelength. So, what has kind of, you kind of touched on this, but I'm almost going into it further. What has kind of driven you to take this is what you wrote and articulate it this way versus articulating it that way?
yeah, if I'm going in the wrong direction, let me know. But I guess the way I think about it is that I grew up listening to a lot of different kinds of music, um, and I mean, obviously everybody did. But my point is that uh, like for example, Enya, all the way to System of a Down, to Frederick Chopin, to Daft Punk, like all these kind of extremes. But I think the entire point is that if it makes me feel an emotion, then that's what feels right to me. And so some of my work, you know, goes in a certain direction because that's what makes me feel this certain emotion. What the hell was your question?
Why would you take a song and turn it acoustic pop versus turning it into something more like electronic? Like what kind of drives the direction the production takes? Is it due to what the song was at hand when you wrote it? Is it how you just how you're going off of how you heard it? What kind of like what drives essentially your production and arrangement choices to kind of drive home the ultimate message of the song?
Um, sure. So I'll use one of my recent songs that's not out yet, but as an example, you know, this one idea, um, was just a voice memo of just my acoustic guitar and my voice, um, and from that, I think that based on the energy that it had, or the kind of the message that it has, um, kind of determines what direction I want to take it in. Um, and sometimes it's just a matter of um, wanting to kind of stay true to the lyrics or the content of the song, and not maybe be too distracting. So in which case I might just have a very bare bones, basic production or I guess direction for genre, so to speak. Um, but for this one, for example, this most recent song, I guess part of me heard it. I guess my mind fills in the blanks before, like my subconscious mind fills in the blanks before my conscious mind does sometimes. And so I heard the song in my head being performed a certain way. And that happened to be a very upbeat, energetic, um, wide and full production, with pop rock, and some little bit of grit. And I don't know. I guess my point is that it's hard to describe sometimes how I decide to take a certain song in a certain direction. Um, and I guess I wish it were more intentional so I could explain that. But my point is that sometimes it's just whatever the song wants to be. That's what it is. Um, and so I try not to force, you know, a square block into a triangle hole, you know? Um, so yeah,
No, that makes sense. I mean, I think like personally, that's kind of the direction that I go a lot of times, which is why I write it on guitar. It'll stay forever on guitar. I can't unhear it the way I wrote it. So, um, but I think honestly, my mindset on everything has always been if that's what comes naturally, that's the way that it should be. Because if you try to force something in a different direction, even if that's how you want it to sound, it's not going to feel as authentic. It's not going to feel as real as it would if you just kind of let it be. Sometimes you just have to let the sleeping dog lie. Sometimes you just have
yeah,
to let the song exist in the way that it was made to exist. As challenging as that may be, because sometimes it could be completely different than the way you wanted it. Sometimes it'll change over time. You never really know. Every songs are like snowflakes. Everything has its own different kind of place. They're all unique in their own individual way.
yeah,
Some can be more frustrating than others, but that's just the nature of the beast. So,
yes.
um, if you had to create a new genre around your style of music, what would it be called? I know that kind of is hard based on the conversation that we just had where you're not putting yourself in a box, but I'm asking you to put yourself in a box just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's I've even had a friend of mine like kind of echo this sentiment is that like I feel like a lot of my stuff is almost like a progressive version of whatever it is. So like, you know, like progressive acoustic pop or, you know, progressive acoustic alternative, you know, like, um, and I guess what I mean by that is like, it's kind of echoing a sentiment I was saying before was that it's hard for me um, to create something and be proud of it and be happy with it if it sounds like too close or too similar to something else or if it sounds too basic or banal. um, and so I definitely try to like push the envelope a little bit. You know, I mean, I'm not like going all dream theater crazy, but you know, for example, with imperfectionist, you know, the um, I can't believe it, you know, that switches time signatures from 6/8 to 5/8. Um, and that I don't think 5/8 is very common in pop music. And so I think that, you know, I think I'm trying to add like a progressive element to whatever I do, no matter what kind of genre it's in.
Hmm. That's interesting. I also didn't even know that about I Can't Believe It.
I appreciate that because that means it was done well. Because
Yeah.
if
Is
you're
it from like the
struggling,
verse to chorus?
the chorus is in
5/8.
5/8,
Okay. Once you
and
say that, I kind of am like, that's why the rhythm is that way, but it happens naturally.
but that's my point is, and I appreciate that because another professor of mine, when she heard the song, she said the same thing. Was like she could tell that it was different, that the time signature was different, but it didn't feel out of place.
No.
Um, and so I think that, you know, if I can pat myself on the back a little bit, I think that it was well executed, and
Hmm.
it wasn't there just to be there. I think it added urgency and you know, some sort of, you know, indescribable you know, emotion that I can't kind of put my finger on.
No, absolutely. And I think it worked kind of well in the sense of like how it like it's one of those things where it's like whether you consciously did it that way or not, or it just kind of happened naturally, it's like that kind of adjustment is a perfect example of like how the production and the arrangement and the structure adds to the lyrics in some way of like emphasis. It kind of allows the story to be told in a more impactful way. Like songs, like the lyrics are what tells the story, but what really kind of drives home that emotion is everything wrapped around it. So it's like that kind of allowed that to be more of like the emphasis point. It allowed it to really have that extra little substance of impact, with the way that subtle change where it wasn't something that happened unnaturally, whether you intended it for it to be 5/8 and 6/8 or not, or it just kind of like What I always do is I'm like, I don't really realize anything's in like 6/8 until I go to record it. And then I'm like, oh, well, that's why that kind of has this feeling to it. Could have been a happy accident, but it was definitely executed in a way that just really added to the music more than, felt like, oh, like a music nerd's gonna look at that and be like, oh, 6/8 to 5/8, like that's so cool. You never see 5/8 ever. Can't tell you the last time I've ever been like, oh, this is 5/8. No, that just doesn't exist. But to the casual listener, they're gonna be like, I don't know what happened here, but I like it, you
Right.
know?
And if I can just add to that, I think that like if you can make something um like digestible for that, like for the average listener who is not a musician, they don't know music theory, but they love music, and the way, and if they're listening to it and they don't even know like what's happening, but it doesn't stick out to them in a bad way. Because I think that if, as long as it doesn't like distract or detract from the song or the message, then it was done well. And I think that is the point I was trying to iterate.
No, absolutely. If it's not one of those things that's kind of makes you like pause for a second and be like, wait, what just happened? And then you're like ignoring what's being said, then you're fine. As long as it's not a deterrent, or a distraction, like you said, it's in good shape.
Yeah.
Is there a release or a song that you've written that you're most proud of or you think best embodies who you are as an artist? It's a hard one, especially with the lengthy catalog that you have. But I always kind of phrase this as, if you were to sell somebody on who you are as an artist and you had one song to kind of show them to try and like convert them to a fan, essentially, what song would you kind of pick out of the lineup?
Oh God. That's
Too many options.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I'm sure everybody who gets this question is like, oh, if I had to choose one song, like I don't, that's such a hard thing to do. You know, but like, I guess for me, since I'm like kind of always improving and I'm always kind of experimenting, um, the, I think for example, this new song, it's not out yet. I'm hoping to come out next month in May, probably. Um, it's definitely more like electronic based, um, but it has guitar elements that make it unique, um, and typical for my music is to have some clean and clear melodies in the vocals, um, and layering. So even though it's not out yet, I think that that song might be a good example, of kind of me as an artist, despite it not being my traditional mainstay of like acoustic kind of low key vibes. But on the other hand of that, I think that imperfectionist is a pretty good example of me as an artist. How could I let you disappear? I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I can't believe it now. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I can't believe it now. So now I am marching to the death of our love, with a woven reminder that I wasn't enough. No one told me that I'd die slowly without you by my side. I'm limited by 3 oceans, and my emotions are begging me to find some artistic way to call you home. We don't have a clue when, but we'll be back again for you. When we'll be back again for you. We don't have a clue when, but we'll be back again for you. when we'll be back again for you. I think it got kind of down to my roots as an artist, as a songwriter. It's the kind of style and content I think that early me would have written. And I think that, but I think that the songs themselves are stronger than what I was writing even 6 years ago. Before I spent all this time training and learning from like the best. And so, I think definitely more of my recent stuff are good examples of what you can expect from me, and I think it might be a little bit of a pitfall being so diverse. Um, and so I guess what I mean by that is like, if someone comes across a song that they like of me and they want more of that, you might not find exactly more of that.
Yeah,
Um, at least not, a bunch of it, because I mean, I don't even know how many songs I have out right now, like 50.
a
Um,
lot.
and they're all they're all just kind of like I was saying before, they're all kind of just where I was in my life. They're just kind of me shedding my skin. And I mean, I'm really excited for what my skin looks like this year, because I've got a good um, kind of variety of sounds and genres. I've got imperfectionist, which is very acoustic based and kind of basic, so to speak. Um, but meanwhile, being I think strong songs. Basic, quote unquote, basic productions don't have to mean that they're like bad songs. And then I've got this most recent one that just came out, which is Moment of Sacrifice, which is very, very different from everything I've ever done before, because it's almost like an EDM track almost. It's like but it still has my essence there. It still has
Mhm.
um that vulnerable lyrical content. And I think I like to think that I have pretty original melodies. I have a lot of my old stuff up still, obviously, because I mean that's who I was at the time. I'm not gonna like try and hide that. But I do think that my more recent stuff is a better representation of who I am, um, as a songwriter, as an artist, as a singer. Um, and so, I think this year alone is gonna be a good year for showcasing kind of the breadth of my work and my capability, I guess.
Um, I mean, yeah, I mean, it makes sense that things are ever evolving. I mean, it's the same way that with listening to music, like things change. Like you go through different phases of like, oh, I really like this and I really like that, and then it shifts. You're not gonna listen to the same stuff constantly without other things in the mix. Like I'm not listening to the like B.O.B. and Wiz Khalifa rap music that I was in seventh grade, people change.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense that like on the creative end, that has variety. And even within, like you said, like Imperfectionist already came out so far this year. We have more songs on the way that are different even from that. Like even that makes sense. We're not the same person every day. We're not the same person every week. We're not the same person every year. So that's to be expected. Um, Kind of jumping back to what you said about um taking songs in different directions. Like some of your stuff's been electronic, some of it's been very acoustic. What about, I mean, obviously you're telling the stories in the same ways. Like you're still the one writing it. It's still your lyrics. It still has, like you said, your essence. But what is it, do you think, from the kind of listener side of things that would connect it for someone from one thing to the next, even if they are sonically different? Like if it's like, what would make someone stick around who's usually very like an acoustic type fan of music, like a lot of their, like they like that, but then like what's going to for them is going to connect that kind of stuff that you've put out to these other things to make them Like, what kind of value are they going to find in this other stuff that isn't sonically what they're used to, but what's going to kind of connect all those pieces together, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, part of the way I think about it is that, like I was describing earlier, part of the reason I write the way I write in all these different styles and very eclectic um, writing style and production style, um, is that no one sound, no one sound or genre is going to um, exclusively make someone feel a certain way or understand a certain message or something. So my point, I guess, is that I guess subconsciously I am kind of appealing to the people who aren't looking for that specific genre. They're looking for, you know, the message or the emotion of it. Because I mean, I can't think of anybody who strictly listens to only one genre, and I guess I would say my appeal is is in the content and in the message and in the emotion that I try to um, evoke um, in those songs, regardless of the quote unquote genre that they take on, um, because you know, like I said before, after all, that's just packaging, um, and you know that packaging can um, attract some people and it might deter others. Um, but as cheesy as it sounds, it's like uh, if that if if a certain sound or message or whatever in a song can evoke an emotion in you, um, I don't think anybody would be like I don't think anybody's going to be mad at how it sounds. Like I don't think anybody's liked a song or made I don't think anybody has listened to a song, it made them feel something, but then they were like, but I wish it sounded something like, I wish it sounded like this, or I wish it sounded like this. um because like I said before, I grew up listening to all different kinds of music because all different kinds of music made me feel certain ways. And I just wanted to replicate that, replicate the kind of the sheer fact that any different kind of music can make you feel something. Um, yeah, I'm not really articulating myself well, but
It makes sense. No, because it ultimately, like you said, it's essentially summing it up is it's not the packaging that it's wrapped in. It's what's inside the box.
yeah, I mean,
It's the story at hand rather than what different arrangements and production and stuff like that are going on, because that's just the way you write.
yeah, I suppose, and I guess some people might disagree with that. I mean, I think a lot of people would disagree with that because I know that packaging can make a difference in how people experience the song. But my point is that you know I'm going to package it how I package it, because that's how it made me feel something. So if I'm not, if I'm writing something, it doesn't make me feel anything. How am I supposed to expect that you feel something from it? So you know, instead of, I guess, using the packaging that I'm supposed to use, um, I I use what I want to use and what I feel is best for it. Um, Again, I'm not really articulating myself well on that point, but I think you get the gist.
No, it ultimately does. It makes sense. It's from an executional standpoint, it's not about making everything sound the same. It's enabling each individual story to be told in its own way.
Right.
In the in and where what connects one to the other is not the sound and it's not the specific story. You're not going to write about the same thing all the time, but it's how you are telling the story that is the same across the board. It's how
Right.
you're using the music part to enable the story to be kind of experienced, consumed at its full capacity and ability,
Hmm.
rather than, oh, I wrote this, but like to make it sound like me, it has to be acoustic guitar and different, like vocal arrangements or whatever. It's not that. It's what can each individual song be like, how can each individual song be taken to its full capacity, which is honestly to me the way that it should be done, whether it's done like that across the board or not. It's just because it is ultimately, if it's going to make you feel something, it should be in that song's truest form, not, oh, this is just, how it's done because of who it is.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. And
it's about the story.
yeah. And I guess I know we keep reiterating the same point, but I guess one last thing I'll say about it is that, you know, if I want to hear that idea or this story, for example, in a certain way, you know, that's what works for me. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not like too concerned about pleasing, the Billboard Hot 100. I understand that it's probably not gonna make it there, but what feeds my soul and what keeps me going is experimenting and playing in the sandbox, so to speak. I mean, building your own castle instead of, whatever.
No, absolutely. It makes sense. I think if you're catering for the Hot 100, then
It's a different beast. I mean, I
yeah.
definitely think it's a different beast. You know, obviously some people are fortunate enough to be in the position where they are able to fulfill themselves creatively as well as, cater to their audience and pay their bills. Um, you know, so I think that some people might be like, well, you're not making any money doing that. And like, I get it, but this this makes me so happy. And I think that I wouldn't feel comfortable really showing someone something that doesn't sound original. Like, that doesn't sound cool, different. Obviously some of my stuff is, probably sounds similar to some other things if you were to really cherry pick and dive into it. Um, but the stuff that I'm most proud of, and I think a lot of the stuff that I'm most recently been working on and coming out with is, they're songs that are that are different, um, and they sound different. And I think as silly as it might sound, I think I like the fact that I can't be like, you know, someone's trying to describe, what kind of music I write. It's like they might have trouble with that, and that's okay, you know, because you know, that's just that's just how I write. That's just who I am as an artist.
No, and I mean, I am a firm believer that not all music is for everyone, but everyone's music is for someone.
Right.
There's an audience for every, as long as it's halfway decent, at least. But even, there's probably, some people claim that there's no bad music. I'm not necessarily a firm believer in that,
Mm.
but I think that every song or every artist has someone out there who will enjoy their music, whether they've found that those people yet. It's a case by case basis, but
Right.
I think that there's a home for every artist's catalog. And it might be, somebody likes like two of your songs, but there are going to be other people out there that like all 50 or whatever, however many there are. There's somebody that's going to want to listen to that top to bottom because of the kinds of stories you're telling. It's just a matter of finding them, which is ultimately the struggle of an independent artist in a nutshell,
Yeah.
is that audience factor. But that's It's the big hill to hike, you know. But um if you had to pick two or three artists that you think your music is like a combination of, who would you choose? Again, hard to answer with quite a variety, but
Yeah, I
like
mean, yeah, sorry to cut you off. I just
no, you're
like,
good.
because I have been writing for so long. I think that, um, I'm much older than a lot of my colleagues were at Berkeley, and I've been writing for much longer. But my point is that in 2007, which was, holy shit, 15 years ago, 16 years ago,
Yeah.
um, in 2007, I would have said that, my stuff's a combination of like Rob Thomas and Collective Soul and Foo Fighters and, um, you know, Ben Howard, but as it progressed, I mean, today, it's totally different. I might say like, hints and influences of people like, you know, Taylor Swift and Shawn Mendes, or, like 1975, like I was saying with this upcoming song. And I hate to be a bad guest, but I can't answer that question because that's just not how it works. I don't think, honestly, for anybody, especially because for me, I dive into so many different sounds and genres. You know, I mean, hell, I System of a Down, Frederick Chopin, Daft Punk, Enya, like those are so different, all so vastly different, and um, especially with how long I've been doing this, I don't think that I can in good conscience try and boil that down to two.
That's fair. It is a tricky question to answer, and I've had people say answers like, "Oh, people tell me I sound like this person," or I really like this person's music. It's not always an accurate depiction because, like for me, the stuff that I think my stuff sounds like is different than the stuff that I like listen to a lot of the time. It's a weird kind of situation to address. But
Sure, I mean, for the
yeah.
record, now that you say that, I will say that I've been told that at least my voice, I sound like Ben Platt, but
Mm.
I wouldn't say necessarily the songwriting style is, the same or anything like that. But that's just uh, at least one recurring um, thing that I've heard from people.
Now that you say that, I can hear
Okay.
it. Add me to the list. um, what do you think sets you apart from other independent artists?
We're kind of beating a dead horse here, but I think probably the biggest thing is my eclectic sound. Um, you know, as well. I mean, again, I mean, I've probably been doing this for longer than some people, but I do think that I'm quite a prolific writer. I think that my catalog is pretty vast already, and um, it's just growing by the month. And I mean, as far as like Spotify goes, I mean, I've already written 4 songs in the past 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Like whether it's a co-write or a solo write, I think that I'm pretty prolific in that sense. So and I think that it does it. I think that it does it kind of does it justice, or it kind of bodes well for the fact that I release so much music. Is that it kind of, I think it might kind of soften the edge, but like between such drastic differences in genre. Um, because it's not like I have, one year I'll put out one single that's very acoustic and chill, and then the next year I put out one single that's like an EDM dance track. I guess my point is saying that um, I think it bodes well for me that I put out so much, and I write so much, um, that kind of, at least in my mind, gives me, like, affords me the luxury of experimenting. Because I'm kind of, I feel like there's kind of something for everybody. like you were saying before, in what I write, in the styles that I, you know, release. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that makes sense, and I think I think you're right. I think the length of your catalog does kind of compensate is the wrong word, but it makes up for like the variety. Like it's not, because if you had that many songs that were all of the same kind of nature, it might get boring, like unless you're like constantly like reinventing the wheel, that's going to get old. Like, like even people like think about One Republic, think about Taylor Swift, think about Katy Perry, even people who have been doing this for upwards of a decade or even edging on two, and maybe in some cases. Um, that like One Republic's Apologize doesn't sound the same as whatever song they had that was on the new Top Gun movie, and Taylor Swift, like Fearless doesn't sound the same as Midnight's and doesn't sound the same as Red. Like that is going to evolve over time. Some people do it in a more drastic way than others, but if you're doing the same thing where if you can look at what you're doing and even look 5 years ago and say this fits right in the sense of like not, there's some connection there, but in a way of like if you put this album and this album together, it would make sense, then you're doing something wrong. If you can take
Yeah, I
everything
mean,
that you've done and put it into one big chunk and say this all fits the same bill, you might want to change it up a little bit. And so with your kind of variety in style and everything, it makes sense. It happens naturally. It is the way that it should be done if that's what happens naturally, like that. I'm a huge advocate for doing whatever comes naturally. If you're forcing it, it's not going to be as good as if you just kind of guided it into its natural state.
right. And something I wanted to iterate is that, like, you know, if I had a full album, for example, excuse me, if I had like a full album of songs with, campfire chords and, a few layered vocals and, even if all the songs are different, but they all sound pretty much the same, like, that's just for me personally. That just doesn't work for me. I can't. I get restless. Um, and even if I'm trying to create cohesion, but within an EP or an album or something, um, there has to be a difference, and there has to be something, um, kind of that distinguishes each one. Um, I like to think that if you were to skip to any timestamp in any one of my songs, it would be pretty obvious which one it is if you obviously knew my entire catalog. But
Mm-hmm.
that's my point, is that I hate writing personally songs that all sound the same. Um, because, you know, like I was saying before, I mean, I grew up listening to music that did not sound all the same, and it still made me, still helped me like grow as a person, and you know feel things in such a wide breadth of styles, um, that I get restless when I'm stuck in one. I don't know.
I feel like if you're doing the same thing over and over, and like your example of, if you went to a random timestamp, if you weren't able to identify, being familiar with the catalog, if you weren't able to identify a separate, like this song from this song of somebody's stuff, and they're doing like the same thing over and over again, to me, that takes the art out of artist. If it, then it just becomes very rudimentary in the way of just like you're taking something that is at its like deepest form in a creative process and a creative outlet, if you will, and making it very systematic and very like left brained. I think
Well,
left brained, right? I
yeah,
think right brained is the creative.
yeah. I mean, I agree, and to an extent, I also think that obviously that works for some people, because some people, they just they have their outlet is just a little different, you know. For some
Hmm.
people it's like very lyric driven, very, you know, kind of folk story driven, in which case they don't really, they just want some support, you know, so to speak, support in the guitar to tell the story. Um, and, you know, that's fine. But I'm just saying my outlet is different. You know, my part of part of what f- fulfills me and feeds my craft is having that difference and that distinguishability.
Right. And it's just like I said, like at the end of the day, and what I always kind of hold to be true is if that's what happens naturally, go for it. But if you're
Right.
forcing it to, like, if you have, like, you, for instance, very wide catalog, if you're taking all of those songs and making them in one set way, that's not doing yourself the best you can. You know, you're doing yourself a disservice by forcing your hand in doing everything this way, whereas the songs themselves were supposed to be done in, you know, like I said, if whatever comes naturally is what going to be whatever is most authentic, and that's what should be done.
Yeah. To each their own, obviously.
Correct. Yeah. But as yeah, I'll leave it at that. Otherwise we'll be here all
I
day.
think we get it.
What impact do you ultimately want to have with your music, with your artistry as a whole?
Something I've, you know, capitulated in the past is kind of a desire to um, evoke, obviously evoke emotions in people, obviously. But my point is that um, in regards to feeling like it's okay to to be open and to, you know, kind of show your wound to the world, because it's okay. I think everybody has their own their own struggles and their own problems that they're going through, and you know, if something, if a song of mine can make you feel heard, um, I think that's all that matters. Um, you know, I'm not expecting any of my music to make someone have a revelation about something that they should change, but I think just being heard is like it's huge, um, because I think that's ultimately what people come back to, is if they feel heard and they feel like they're not alone. Um, you know, and I've spoken publicly about, I mean, as public as I can. I only have like 800 followers. I'm saying I as I've spoken before about, um, I'm like not afraid to share that I, you know, have struggled with depression and anxiety, and I know that so many other people do too. Um, and some of my music, uh, you know, they're just telling stories, but a lot of it is, whether it's subliminal or not, you know, I am kind of playing into, you know, coping with these thoughts or these emotions or whatever I'm going through, or I was going through, um, and I don't think anybody should be afraid to to share that part of themselves. Um, you know, I mean, I I've spoken or sung, I've sung about, you know, some pretty tough material in some of my songs, and I guess I'm just not afraid to show that part of me. And I think the point is that I don't think anybody else should be afraid to do that either. Um, you know, because something that I've, you know, thought about before is that, you know, everybody has demons, so to speak. Um, you know, and if you were able to like just see how many other people are dealing with similar things, you know, you'd be less afraid to confront your own. And at least for me, in what I do, it helps me process um, and deal with a lot of the things that I've gone through and felt and thought. Um, and so, I think again, one of the biggest points that I think I want um, to be heard is that if my music can make someone feel heard or feel seen or feel not alone, um, then then I've won.
That's kind of one of the better, I mean, to each their own, but like that's one of the better kinds of purposes essentially you can kind of have behind it is like if you're doing this just to like get your own voice heard in the sense of like, I'm writing music so people know who I am and I'm writing music just to kind of like, live that lifestyle or whatever. It's not going to resonate as much as someone who's doing it for the sake of who's hearing it, who's doing it for the sake of that community, who's doing it for the sake of not it mattering as much that it's your specific voice and your name that people know, but that the stories that you're telling are getting heard and understood. The stories that you're telling are reaching the people that are going to want it, going to need it, going to enjoy hearing it. I think the more that it's because I mean it feels more authentic. Nobody's gonna fake doing. You'd think nobody's gonna fake doing that for a
Yeah,
crowd. You know what I mean? And it shows that it kind of gives an extra meaning to the songs and everything themselves to kind of have that perspective on this is what this person is trying to really showcase and trying to articulate, and the message kind of shows through in a lot of your music, at least from my understanding. So I think that's like one of the best kind of answers you can have to a question like that. um
yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, because um, again, if I go back to growing up listening to music before I really started writing, and obviously even after, but it's like I would hear these songs and they would help me. Whether or not it would change my life is not the point, but it would help me feel these emotions at a deeper level. And I don't think you should be afraid to feel your emotions. And so, it's like, as cheesy as it sounds, it's like I feel like I need to pass on that service, um, uh, because I, it's hard to describe because some people just don't, you know, um, hear music in the same capacity or the same like way. I mean, in like that it can make you feel things that you can't describe. I mean, that's why they're called feelings. You can't describe them. Um, but my point is that um, the way that I've grown up listening to music and how it can make me feel and make me grow and make me help me deal with what I'm feeling. Um, I guess I felt like that just felt naturally. It felt natural for me to um, try and replicate that.
no, that makes sense. um I think that brings us to the final question and ultimately the concept behind the podcast, which is why music?
And like not art or like not like painting or rock climbing. Is that what you
Well,
mean?
just why music rather than literally anything else?
Well, I mean, I guess for me, it's kind of a non answer because, like I said before, it wasn't really a choice. It was just what I grew up around. So it's like it, it just was. It was just so natural for me to continue doing what I was already surrounded by. Um, for some people, they're the first of their line um, to, you know, go into music, for example. And I think honestly, they might have a better answer than me, because for me, it just like I don't really have an answer. It's just what I do, and that's what I was that's what I was raised to do, and um, it came so naturally to my whole family. Honestly, I'm just the only one who, like, at least of my siblings, I'm just the only one who stuck with it as a to pursue as a career. Um, and Yeah, I wish I had a better answer. If you can try and probe me another way, go for it.
No, it's ultimately not really why music, it's why not? What else would it be, you know?
Yeah.
Um and that's kind of the best answer because it's kind of like that even bigger moment of, it's doing what happens naturally, doing what kind of is just second nature. It's doing what ultimately is like your calling. Which, is different for everybody. And that's, I mean, I'm a firm believer that that's what everybody should be doing. I know that's not the kind of world that we necessarily can live in, that everybody just gets to do what they feel like they were born to be doing or anything like that. But as much as you can, that's all you can really try to do.
Hmm.
So, no better way about it. Well, I think that brings us to the end of this episode of the Why Music podcast. Check back again next week for another conversation with another independent artist. Thanks for listening.